What's up? This is Kong from XFaderz, and in this video we're going to take a minute to discuss the Gemini PMX-10 and take a closer look at this entry-level budget mixer to see what's offered at this price point. At the time of this recording, I was able to find this mixer for sub $300, to be more specific, between $270 to $300, so I highly advise you to look around to check to see who has the best pricing. Turning the box on its side, we'll be greeted with the details about the product as well as the package contents. As I zoom in on the product, you'll notice that it goes through the list of items, or at least the details about the product, which is a rugged all-metal chassis, 16 multifunction buttons, XLR and quarter-inch combo jacks, and quarter-inch microphone input, the two phono line inputs, but it's switchable. But the main thing I want to point out is the fact that it says that it has a talk-over button for the mic. Unfortunately, this feature does not show up on this model. It actually shows up on the PMX-20. Also, too, the send and receive effects is available on the PMX-20 and not on the PMX-10. I can understand that they made a mistake on the box and it's not worth redoing the packaging. But just in case if you were looking at this package and trying to understand what this mixer can do, this could be misleading. Scrolling down to the bottom, it actually speaks to replacing the crossfader. So you're able to replace the crossfader with the NO fader. So I think that's one of the major selling points for this mixer. And this was the advertisement they were pushing for it. Zooming back out, we'll go ahead and open up the package. And the first thing you'll see is the review card inside of the box, where they're asking you to write a review and you'll be entered in to win one of their giveaways. So here's that information here if you're interested. The next thing we'll see is the, Ziploc bag with the USB cable, the RCA cable, the virtual DJ license, and the manual. So here's just a standard USB cable. Next up is just a standard one pair of RCA cables. And the virtual DJ version 8 LE, we'll get into a little bit more details about that a little bit later, followed by the manual. Now, the one thing I thought was pretty cool as far as the manual was it gave instructions on how to replace the mixer. The crossfader. Normally, when you look inside of the manual, it's just very basic information, specifically speaking to the mixer, but not necessarily upgrading it. So I thought that was kind of refreshing. Next up on the list is the IEC cable. So it has just a standard, it looks like a 6-foot IEC cable. So it shouldn't be any issues with that. It looks pretty normal. Now we'll go ahead and remove the mixer from the box. It's just sealed in there with two foam pads on each side of it. Before we connect this mixer to the turntables and everything, I wanted to walk you through all of the buttons, knobs, and faders on the device, as well as the I/O. So starting at the top left, we have the Effects 1 knob, and to the immediate right is the on-off button for that. And right below that, we have the Effects 2 knob, as well as the on-off button to the immediate right, followed by the loop size. So this button is not clickable. It does have sort of a locking feel, but to activate the loops, you'll need to hit the button right below, which is the loop on. Followed by the cues and samples, and we'll talk a little bit more about that once we hook it up, and the 8 RGB pads right below. Next up is the gain for channel 1. So it is followed by the high, mid, and low, as well as the filter. These are not full kill, so just want to make you aware of that. Next up, after the filter, is the Q knob to queue up in your, the Q button to queue up in your headphones, and the up fader along with the VU meter. Moving along to the center of the mixer, we have a large scroll library knob here, as well as low deck 1 and 2 on each side of that knob. Right below that is the back button to navigate as well through your library, followed by the master, the booth adjustment, mic level, the cue and program, so you can sort of choose which one you want to listen to more, as well as the cue level. It has 2 VU meters. They're pretty much simple. They just have a red at the top, I'm pretty sure, to indicate clipping, or as it says, the peak, and the replaceable crossfader. Everything for channel 2, from the effects to the buttons to the knobs, are exactly the same as channel 1, so nothing really unexpected there. So flipping the mixer up towards us, we'll be able to see what's on the front of the panel. So we have the fader reverse, as well as the control for the crossfader. So on the left-hand side, channel 1, we'll be able to reverse the fader, the up fader, and also change its slope from loose to sharp. Same thing applies on channel 2. And in the center, we'll be able to reverse the crossfader and also change the slope at the knob at the bottom. On the right side of the mixer, we have the headphone port. So we have a 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch headphone ports. And flipping it over to the back, we'll see that it has a pretty sturdy power switch. It did feel very solid. Below that is your IEC port to plug in your power. It comes with a 2 balanced master XLR ports and a ground right below, single ground, an unbalanced master, unbalanced booth, as well as unbalanced record RCAs, followed by the USB, single USB port. Now for the inputs, there is channel 1 and channel 2, but there's a switch for phono and line level. So just be aware of that. The mic in is a combo jack, as mentioned before, and right below is a Kensington lock. As mentioned, it is an all-metal chassis. It feels pretty sturdy, but overall it is lightweight though. Before we jump into all the DVS and sound checks and all of that, I wanted to start with the microphone. So to recap, it does not have a talk over button or on-off toggle button as mentioned on the box, so you'll need to adjust the volume. So I'm using a Shure Beta 58A here to give you an example of how the audio sounds. So I'll go ahead and proceed to do that now. 1, 2, 3, check, 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 check. Testing, 1, 2, 3. This is a test at 12 o'clock. Switching over to 2 o'clock. This is 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 5 o'clock. So this is a test of how the mic sounds. So overall, the microphone sounded pretty good. I didn't have any major issues with it other than the volume was kind of low. I'm not sure if that is sort of a normal thing with the budget mixers and stuff, but the preamps just sounded a little low for me. I'm not saying you can't make adjustments to turn it up some, but just wanted to let you know prior to purchasing. And to be sure to understand, you may have issues cutting through the audio in a mix. But now I'll go ahead and cue up one of my records just so you can hear the sound quality and how loud it is. So I'll take a moment and adjust the master and increase the gain on the channel 2. And I'll also run through the EQ settings just so you can hear what they sound like when you make adjustments. And this is the high setting. Next up is the mids. And this is followed by the low. And last but not least, the filter. So I just wanted to show you what it sounded like, just to reiterate that it does not have full kill, if that's something that you're interested in. One of Gemini's selling points is that they wanted to let you know that the Crossfader is interchangeable with the NO fader. So I wanted to take a minute and at least give you some type of measurement on the Crossfader cut-in. So I grabbed my digital caliper and I proceeded to measure the cut-in for the Crossfader as well as the up faders. I expected both of them to be close to the same, or at least they're using the same faders in both. So just to walk you through those steps here, I'll take a minute to measure. Feel free to fast forward through just to get towards the end, but just to show you. So for me, my measurements, I came up with 3.5, roughly 3.5 millimeters of cut-in lag. So this is okay, I guess, if you're doing mixing, but if you plan on doing any scratching with it, I would highly recommend upgrading to the NO fader, just to make that process or experience a little better. I wanted to take a moment and describe the feeling of the faders. So for me, I sort of like a light fader. I will tell you that these are smooth faders, but they do have a little bit of tension on them. So if you're like myself and you want them to be a little smoother, then you would definitely use some deoxit on it. It will extend the life of the fader as well as lube them up to make it a little more smoother and take some of that surface tension off. I wanted to take a brief moment too to let you hear how it actually sounds. So I started doing just a few crab scratches and some drags as well as just quick fader movements. As I mentioned earlier, this fader could be pretty good if you plan on doing mixing. So if you set the curve or the slope to, I guess, loose, this is just how it will sound as you fade between the channels. Because they offer the option to change the up faders, I also wanted to show you how it sounded when you set it to sharp. And here in the video, I set the up fader to loose to let you see how it sounds when you make that adjustment. So this part here is personal preference, but if you decide that you want to change the fader knobs as well as the fader caps, you'll be able to do so. It uses the standard 180 fader caps or knobs, and also the standard fader caps. So you shouldn't have any issues finding them. Specifically, I put the chroma caps on this. The only minor gripe that I have is I actually prefer the lined as opposed to the, I guess, filled in area of the knobs on this mixer. So just to give you a better example, if you look here, you'll see the shaded area on the default caps. And it's kind of tough if you need to make precision adjustments, meaning you need to set the gains to the same exact amount on each one. That shaded area won't give you the best representation versus the line. But again, this is just personal preference. It's not a major concern. It's just how I feel about the caps on this particular mixer. So it's time to go ahead and start talking about the DVS functionality of this mixer. So the first thing you'll need to do is navigate to the Gemini website and download the driver, specifically the ASIO driver for this mixer. If you plan on using this mixer with Traktor, it's a good idea to go ahead and grab the Traktor mapping tool on the website. So once you download those, you'll be able to quickly set it up with Traktor. I'll walk you through those steps in a minute. But also the virtual DJ is native. It's a native controller, so a lot of those settings are already set up for you. So on the support page, you go ahead and click downloads. And what's interesting is that you can just go to the Windows ASIO drivers here and download it. And this will apply to this mixer as well as the PMX-10. So it doesn't have a specific section for each mixer, rather just an all-in-one driver to be used for their line of PMX mixers. So once you get the driver installed, you'll be greeted with this window here. It's pretty much basic and straightforward. It gives you the ins and outs of the mixer as well as the ASIO buffer length. So this is the latency for this particular mixer. I like to start off by walking you through the setup for Traktor Pro. So make sure you have Traktor Pro 3. This is the one that will allow you to use third-party hardware to set up. First thing you'll need to do is, of course, purchase a license for it. But once you've downloaded the driver and everything, and that TSI or that mapping file that I mentioned earlier in the video, you'll be able to reference that in the settings. So basically, you'll be able to import those settings into Traktor. And the way you do this by clicking on the cogwheel at the top and clicking Import in the Settings window. Navigate to where you downloaded the TSI file and select it. Go ahead and click Open. And it will bring up this window here. It's important that you check all of the boxes here, especially the one for audio devices and settings. Once you click OK, it will pop up with the Gemini ASIO driver at the top. Everything is set up for the most part for the audio section, but you'll also have to set up your MIDI. So going down to the bottom, if you click on Controller Manager, you can simply choose the generic MIDI and choose the PMX-10 for the import and output. By doing this, now you'll have enabled the MIDI, the presets for this mixer for Traktor. It's also a good idea to jump into the output routing and just check over everything, make sure everything is set properly. Right now it's set to 48 kilohertz, and just make sure that the deck outputs are set correctly, but I'm pretty sure they will be. And here's where I had my first major disappointment. So going in the effects section, I had turned on post-fader effects, but realizing that this mixer does not support it. So again, if you are looking for a mixer that does post-fader effects, this is not going to be the one for you. Now I took a moment and switched over the effects to just single effects, at least on the right-hand deck. just to show you how the controls are for this mixer. So on the left-hand deck, I have the multiple effects. And as you can see here, I'm just making adjustments with the effects knobs on the mixer themselves. And it's not a one-to-one. So a lot of the effects that you have may not be controlled as you would prefer them to be done. But you do have the option to remap a lot of stuff. But this is another one of my gripes with this mixer, is because it is flexible to work with a lot of different DVS software, but you will have to do a lot of the mapping yourself. So now it's time to go ahead and fire up the DVS portion of the demo. So as you can see here, it works pretty good, and I apologize, I had the effect turned on kind of high, so turning it down now, you can hear it. It's actually working, playing fine with DVS. One of the things that happens though is when you do make changes to the ASIO driver, it will make these weird noises in between the switchovers. There's no way to describe it other than saying it's more like a popping noise. So be mindful of it. You know, like it's almost like that old thing when you're dealing with older amps and they first turn on and they have that popping noise, where a lot of the newer amps have like a soft turn on. So in this portion of the demo here, I'm just playing with the loop, turning it up, turning it down, turning it off, just to show you it works pretty good. And selecting the cue points, just simply hitting the cue button and then being able to trigger them. If you want to delete a cue point, you will simply hold the cue button and press on the button that corresponds to the one that you want to delete. So the sample section was kind of unique when it came down to the mapping. So I will tell you that once you set up your samples and create the remix deck, or at least have it visible on your desktop layout, you'll be able to add a sample into each one of the banks. So 1 through 4 on your hot cue pads will be those corresponding samples. Now, if you leave 5 through 8 empty, it will give you the opportunity to be able to turn off those samples. So for example, let's say I triggered a sample on 1. By pressing the 5 button, it will try and load the second sample in the first bank, but because there's not one there, it will turn off that sample, right? And as you can see in the example, that's exactly what it did. Now, in all fairness, on the Gemini website, they don't even mention that for the TSI. But I think they just did it just to get you started. And it even says in the information, and I'll show you that on screen shortly, that they said this is just a starting point for you. So in all fairness, you do have the opportunity to map everything exactly how you want it, but it's just the fact that you will have to play with it to get it exactly like you need it. Overall, everything worked pretty good for the most part. You still will need to do some mapping changes and stuff. And if I could recommend to you, going inside of the mapping and at least changing the encoder speed will be very helpful to you. What I noticed was when you try and make small adjustments or trying to scroll through 1 or 2 songs, it went way too fast. It would jump at least 2 to 3. And I had to sort of fine tune it. So that will be very helpful if you are having that same issue when you're using it. But other than that, though, everything was pretty much straightforward. As I mentioned earlier, you can go to the Gemini website and download the Traktor mapping. It'll give you a little bit more details about the mapping in general, and it will provide an image to show you what each button does. Interestingly enough, they use the back button as the shift button, so you can access some of the additional mappings using that. Scrolling through, it will also give you a detailed explanation of each one of those commands. But at the very bottom of the screen, it also speaks to this is just a starting point for you in Traktor, and they encourage you to do your own personal mappings. And that's pretty much all I have to share with you about Traktor. I'm pretty sure there's other things you're going to discover along the way, but those were the key points that I want to touch base on. So for starters, I can tell you the virtual DJ experience was a lot better. Basically, you plug in the mixer, it will recognize it immediately, and then you can just click on PMX-10 and everything will be set up for you. Now, everything is not perfect, but for the most part, the experience in setting it up and using it was better. And for that reason, I'm not surprised why they bundled Virtual DJ LE with this mixer. So before we go any further, we need to take a minute and talk about that. So Virtual DJ LE is the limited edition of Virtual DJ. They offer a 30-day trial period for Virtual DJ Pro, which gives you all the features. But I think once we break that down a little bit more, you'll be able to see what you're missing out on. So right at the very beginning, you'll be only looking at 2 to 99 decks, which it really doesn't apply because it's a 2-channel mixer. You can't do things like change your logo or remove logos from videos. You can't broadcast professional radio servers, stuff like that. It's only for this controller, which is not a surprise. And it also depends on using time code and stuff like that. And because this is a DVS controller, it shouldn't be an issue. But the biggest thing that I think I wanted to speak to was the pricing. So you're looking at least $299 for the full version, right? But to break down the differences even more, on screen now will tell you the things you will not be able to do with the LE license. So after the 30-day period, if these are some of the things you're interested in, you may want to roll in the cost of that to the total cost of the mixer, and it may put you above your budget. So like I said before, it's either $19 a month or $299 for the pro version, and for the business version, it will be $99 a month. So it makes it kind of difficult to look at it as a budget-minded purchase when you look at the total cost is more than most mixers that have, I guess, the pro version included. So for context, I'm actually subscribed to the pro version of the Virtual DJ. So walking you through this process, there may be some differences between the LE version, but because I already have the pro version, I think this is what you would possibly look forward to. Everything worked as expected for the most part. The only thing that I struggled with was the mapping again. And this is a fully customizable mixer, so you can map it however you feel. But the default mapping, some of the settings were a little weird. So for example, when it came down to the effects section, the first knob would turn the effects on and off. But the second knob, when you hit the on button, it would change the setting of the first effect. So to clarify for you, right now I'll be adjusting the first effects knob, and as you can see, I'm changing the parameter for the flanger, and that works fine. If you press the on button, it will turn on the flanger, which is expected. But when you adjust the knob, it will make a change to the speed of the flanger. But if you hit the on button on the second effect, in turn that, it will change the effect in the first bank. So now I'm actually changing it to, I guess, phaser. And then if you hit the on button for the second effect, now you can adjust the settings for the phaser. And this may all be related to the view that I have, or even using the pro version and getting the, I guess, the additional layouts, or just being able to make those changes that you might not be able to make in the LE version. But it was still something I definitely wanted to mention to you before you purchase this mixer. In regards to the loop function, I didn't have any issues at all. So I was able to adjust the loops, turn them on and off, and everything worked as expected. But I can tell you when I moved down to the Q section / sample section, I started to have issues again. So when I hit the Q button on the mixer, it actually controls the stems for Virtual DJ. So it worked fine. I didn't have any issues with that. But it was the fact that it was labeled as Qs and it actually controls something different. Now, I'm pretty sure, again, you can make some changes to the mapping and you can fix that, but just out of the box, it was kind of weird for me. Once you tap the sample button, you'll be able to actually control your Qs. So again, no issues here whatsoever. It was just kind of weird because it was set to the sample button. But you can assign your Qs by tapping one of the RGB pads, and then if you press and hold the sample button, you can click the Q or tap the Q and delete it. So I can tell you, browsing through the library, there were no issues at all. I didn't experience anything like I had with Traktor as far as being able to scroll through individual tracks. Everything worked as expected. I can tell you that the best part about this whole experience is actually the hardware manual from Virtual DJ. If you need any help, I guess, setting up anything, configuring anything, taking a look at their manual, you'll get a lot of good information as far as how to use Virtual DJ with this mixer. Be sure to check the description below. I'll leave links to all the topics that we covered in this video so you can refer to them if you need further assistance. Okay, for my final thoughts on this mixer. But first, a random thought. Do you remember the DJ all-in-one box deals that you used to could get that came with 2 turntables and a mixer? The idea was to conveniently get everything you needed to get started as a DJ. The issue was you get what you pay for. So the carts and stylists that came with them weren't great. The turntables were normally belt driven, at least when you went with the cheaper packs, and you ended up spending more money in the long run. It's important to understand that this is a beginner entry-level DJ backup equipment. Even the provided software references the fact that although it does work, it's not necessarily for professional use. So who is this for? Well, it's best suited for the bedroom DJ, hobbyist, or occasional house party DJ. Some of the items that are of concern is the preamps are okay. The Crossfader is not great for scratching or learning how to. There are no post-fader effects. The drivers and software support is limited. It has generic MIDI mapping support with limited I/O, and upgrading to the InnoFader and purchasing a full version of Virtual DJ and Traktor would be costly. On the other hand, it is an all-metal construction and it seems to be pretty sturdy. It works with DVS, and that includes Traktor and Virtual DJ. It has balanced XLR on the back, which a lot of the entry-level, I guess, controllers and stuff do not have XLR. It's normally just RCA. And the best part is if you're on a tight budget, you will be able to afford this. Quick tip, you will need to purchase your own DVS vinyl or timecode vinyl. I would highly recommend you choosing the Traktor vinyl because it will work with Traktor Pro as well as Virtual DJ. At the end of the day, this is an affordable mixer. If you set your expectations and understand your needs, this may be a great value. But if you know you aspire to be a mobile, club, streaming DJ, you may just want to consider saving a little more money to purchase a second-hand Pro mixer. I've checked some of the used websites and refurbished, and I was able to find Reigns and Pioneer mixers for a fairly good price, and they're just a little bit more expensive than buying this one new. So it's something definitely to consider when you are looking to purchase a mixer. With all that being said, I wish you the best of luck. If you do decide to purchase this mixer, let me know in the comment section about your experience. Other than that, that's all I have. Please like, share, and subscribe, and check us out on the website at www.xfaders.com.